Hi, I'm Mike Hall. I'm a film composer, record producer. I want to thank Peter for having me on this show. Um, Look me up on SoundCloud, and I it'd be great to meet you.
I know that you do multiple movies and you talked about you haven't really gotten the comedy thing yet. Is there a genre that you really love to do? Like, is it sci-fi? Is it horror? Which is your favorite?
Um, the most work I've done is in the style is probably horror and suspense. Um, I've always loved that style of music or that style of film, but it kind of ruined me because now when I do watch a film, I'm thinking, okay, that was a good move. I probably would have done that there too. I'm
Hmm.
like,
Hmm.
no, just shut up and watch the movie. It's nobody cares what you think. Just watch the movie.
Yeah.
So, um, I like a lot of dramas. A lot of emotional stuff. So,
Yeah. Well, I know most artists are perfectionists, right? Like, and they don't want to release it or they don't feel like it's done. So to that, when do you know your piece is done or you finished or you're comfortable releasing it out into the world?
that took a long time to figure out, especially when it came to mixes. Um, I got the cat here.
Oh, absolutely.
Get out there. No, that's a trick. It's like, how do you know when a painting is done? How do you know when the mix is done? And it's like, I think if you are somebody who's, you know, I'm not saying I'm a perfectionist, but it's like, if I hear one little thing, I'm not going to be happy with it.
Mhm.
Um, I think at some point you just have to say, you know what, at this point, it's as good as it's going to get. You know, Tomorrow it could be better, but I got to say at this point right now, it's as good as it's going to get. And nobody's going to hear everything that I'm going to hear. You know, I again talking to other more successful, famous artists, I'd say, "Oh, I love that album. That album, I had that." And they'd say, "You know what? I can't even stand to listen to it. It's horrible."
Mhm.
What? What are you? And they said, "Oh yeah, I made so many guitar mistakes." Really? I don't hear any. You know, it, you're going to always be your worst critic, and it's more on the good side because then you're going to think, I did okay on this album, but the next one, you wait, the next one's going to be really good. I mean,
Yeah. Yeah.
you know,
Absolutely. On a scale from 1 to 10, one being the worst, 10 being the best, how much fun are you having when you create?
I would say the fun part is when you're in your zone. They always talk about the zone where, you lose track of time. You don't know what's going on around you. It's just that. Um, there's That's when it's the best. I mean, there's always, difficult times like, you might have spent all this time working on the, music for this film, and then the director comes back and says, "Yeah, that's really not what we had in mind."
Mm.
Then it's more towards the two.
Yeah.
But but for the most part, when you're creating, and you're in your zone, that's or whatever it is that you do, when you lose track of time, that's when it's really good.
Yeah. Well, you create quite a bit of music. How do you handle the copyright situation for yourself? What do you do?
Um, I go through BMI. I don't, you know, I'm really, I'm not that worried about it. Um, I think there's people that, I mean, they can take your music, they can take your art. I mean, it's a digital world. We live in a time where, I mean, you can get anything,
Yeah.
you know. I remember back before the internet, you know, when I would release an album, half of them that I would get, half of the albums that I would press, I'd be giving them out anyway to radio stations, magazines, distributors all over the world.
Mm-hmm.
So I was giving away my music back then. Now, it doesn't cost me anything. And if somebody does steal music, I look at them as a billboard, you know.
Yeah.
I never made any money with it really anyway. So if somebody wants to use it or finds value enough to use it, you know. And now when I make albums, you know, it used to be years ago, oh, I got to push this album. I got to sell as many as I possibly can. And now it's like, you know, I only want you to buy it if you really, really want it. You know, I don't want it to sit there, you know. So as I think you kind of look at things differently after you've, you know, it's like, I'd rather somebody buy it that really wants it, you know, that's really going to listen to it, instead of somebody who's like, yeah, I picked it up. You know, it wasn't good. I'll probably never listen to it again, but you know,
yeah,
I really don't want that sale.
Yeah.
So
absolutely. Well, I see the speakers in the background, the dungeon, so to speak. What are you working on these days?
this week I'm finishing up some smaller sci-fi film, kind of with an 80s vibe. So I'm kind of going through the library and picking out older sounds.
Mm-hmm.
I'm always working on record projects of some kind. I'm producing some songs for an artist out in Washington, as well as another artist out in New York, and so there's always something going on.
Yeah. What do you love it, man? Like, were you drawn to it because you love music or you love sound? Like, how did you get into it?
So I started. I wasn't very, very little music education. I started out. I just wanted to sing for a rock or metal band.
Mm-hmm.
You know, no experience. I had a buddy that bought a junky J.C. Penney guitar, and he sold it to me. And you know, I'm thinking, everyone's saying, "Well, you should take lessons." I'm like, "Nah, I don't have time to take lessons. I want to make an album. I'll learn to play it later."
Yeah,
you know?
yeah. Mm-hmm.
And so that's what I did. I just messed around with it, and I ended up forming my own bands, and we would do shows and tour, and I started getting into recording because we couldn't afford going to a real studio. So I just, would produce and record all of our records. Pretty soon I would start doing mixing for record labels, started doing mastering. And I didn't, I've had people years ago suggest, well, maybe you should do music for film. I'm like, no, those are for the educated people,
Mm-hmm.
Well, then one day I was contacted by this film director from Germany. He said, hey, I want to license some of your tracks for my horror film. And I think it was only one track for the end credits. And
Okay.
And I thought, well, that was easy, And I just kind of, like how I did everything else, I just jumped in and, played around with it. And one film led to another film. And so that's what the majority of my work for the last 25 years has just been doing film music.
Yeah. Well, I'm sorry. Go ahead.
I still do a lot of records and stuff, but.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Well, how does that work from kind of take me from start to finish? Because I'm very naive or very ignorant to the process of getting my license or my music. I don't have music, but if I were a music artist, like how do I get it synced? I get the sync license, and how do I make an agreement with them? Kind of walk me through that process.
Well, I think the biggest thing for everybody, for whatever it is that you do, the first thing to do is define what it is that you do. The second thing is um, find your market. You know, these days it's easier now than ever because musically and artistically anything goes. You know, back when I was starting out, you know, you had to have a record label. You know, the record label had to know how to label you, basically meaning how to sell you and who to sell you to. And so nowadays, you know, you've got social media, YouTube, and that. So you can pretty much do anything artistically you want.
Yeah.
Well, if you're going to, if you're a music artist and you want to promote your music to and get it in films, I would say the best thing to do is go where those people are who are going to want your music in film. So I would go to like LinkedIn groups or Facebook groups that are like indie filmmakers. Um, I wouldn't waste your time going to other music groups because basically you're just mingling with people that are trying to do the same thing that you're doing. So you always want to put yourself in front of the people who are wanting or needing what it is that you do. So I would, if you were trying to get your music in film or TV, I'd look up these filmmaking or filmmakers groups, and you know, they're always going to want to, you know, there's always going to be some filmmaker that wants your music. Whether they have a budget or not, that's another story. But
yeah. Well, you said you kind of jumped in and you're primarily self-taught. At what point did you start feeling like, hey, look, I got a hold of this. I know what I'm doing.
well, that's the thing. I mean, I've been doing music and recording for over 30 years now, and I still am always asking, am I really just faking my way through this? Do I know what I'm doing? You know,
Yeah.
each project's different, so you're always learning. You know, and I'm thinking, well, when is that ever going to start where I feel, you know, like I know what I'm doing? And I think, and now I'm to the point where it's like, I hope that never happens, because once you get to a point where, um, you know, you know what, I'm as good as I'm ever going to be. I'm a pro. You know, that's when you stop growing. You know, but or you stop learning. There's always stuff to learn, and every single day I come down to the studio, I'm still learning something new, you know. So it's like, oh, okay, well that's good. I still have the capability to learn, you know. So um yeah, always be in the mode of there's always something I can learn, you know. One of the great things about film was before I got into it, I was strictly just a rock and metal guy. You know, anything else, I kind of poo-pooed it. Um, well, now all of a sudden, I started in an industry where you had to work with every style of music, you know, and you had to, and when you work with the music that you thought that you would never listen to, you really develop a respect for it, you know, and you realize, oh, you know, there's a talent that goes into all of this stuff, you know. Um, I'm, you know, I'm even working with voiceover artists and sound designers, and I do a lot of mixing and editing and mastering for voice artists. Let's see, November 3rd, I'm going to be giving a course at Princeton about voiceover microphone technique.
Wow.
So, you know, and even then, you know, that was a profession where I thought, all you got to do is read something in front of a mic. Well, then once you start working with it, you realize Well, there's a lot more to that than that, so
Yeah,
um, you really learn to respect all forms of art, and I've met a lot of great artists, that a lot of other great music artists that I would have never probably met or worked with had I not got into doing, the various styles for film. So,
absolutely.
um,
Absolutely. Has technology made sound better or just easier for people to manipulate and do?
both. I started with that was where, there wasn't, it seemed like I was trying to get rid of tape hiss and noise, and now everything's digital. Um, e- Equipment's technology has made equipment, recording gear, video gear. I know huge groups of people that they make they make their films from their phone.
Yeah.
I mean, there's so much technology, and there's a lot of people that think, well, that's a bad thing. That makes everybody, create. And I'm thinking, how could having too much art in the world be a bad thing?
That's right.
So yeah, I wouldn't say there's competition, because comparing one artist to any other artist is like apples to oranges. You do what you do, you know, everybody, they're on their own path of progress and creativity, and, their own careers. So there really isn't, I don't believe there's such a thing as, well, now that everybody's a filmmaker, everybody's got a studio in their home. Now there's so much more competition. It's like, it was never easy,
Yeah. Mhm.
I kind of like it, because now everybody's on the same playing field, you know. It just, I think the only thing that divides us is there's people that think that they believe in overnight success, and then there's others that, like me. Well, I would ask myself, if I was trapped on an island in the middle of nowhere with nobody else, would I still be writing songs? Yeah, that's just what I do,
Mhm. Yeah.
you know.
Yeah. Do you
I'd
have a
probably starve, but I'd still be writing songs.
do you have a favorite song that you've written thus in your throughout your career? You have a couple of favorite songs?
Uh, there's been so many. Um, I've done. I know that they always change. Like a song that I wrote, probably in 1990, I thought was the best sounding thing there was, and then if I listen to it now, it's like, eesh, I don't want to listen to that ever again.
Yeah. Yeah.
There's been some good projects that I've worked with some really good people with, and done some really really great material with. So,
Yeah.
but yeah,
Yeah. Well, but now that you're dropping, I guess, compositions into movies, do you write now specifically for film?
um, no, it's whatever comes to me, you know. I don't. I've got a day job where I work as um, a quality advisor for a big corporation. So for years I thought about, it'd be nice to quit my job and just do music. But on the other hand, if I did that, I'd have to take every project that came along
Mm,
just to try to pay the electric bill.
yeah.
And now I get to just do whatever project sounds really inspiring. So I really like making records, but I like the diversity of film. So
Yeah. What do you think music is? I would say that music is different, but do you think music is better now or worse or about the same as far as like because we were talking about you've been introduced to different genres now and different people. So do you think like from the time of Jimi Hendrix and the Beatles, I know you're familiar with all of that, to now, do you think music is kind of, I don't even know what word I'm looking for, but not as good?
I think music, like any art, is timeless. You know, the only thing that the only thing that I notice is music production. You know, um, I don't know, but otherwise, as far as music, I mean, I listen to. I love old '60s jazz. I mean, I love death metal, and I'm this metal guy, but
Hmm.
and I really love old '60s, late '50s jazz. I was listening to like Dean Martin the other day, and I'm thinking, man, those guys, there was no digital edits there. They had to be right on.
That's right.
Um, I listen to a lot of classical, just just everything. There's a lot of old Motown stuff that I think now that was talent. You know,
Yeah.
these days I try to listen to, and where I'm from, I listen to, from the music production side, it's kind of ruined me a little bit because I'm thinking, oh, I think I heard a vocal edit, or I wonder what microphone they used on the snare drum.
Mm.
And I have to constantly keep telling myself, just shut up and listen to the song. It doesn't matter. Nobody cares.
Yeah.
But at the same time, I'm listening to like those old uh, Motowns uh, songs, and they're like, man, those vocals were so tight, and the music was those guys. They were, basically they come into the studio and it's like they run through it once or twice. Third time they record it, and that's all they ever play.
Yeah.
So it's amazing. I think nowadays you really don't have to be. I don't want to say as talented, but you have way more options. You've got infinite amounts of tracks. The Beatles were struggling to do four tracks, and they were bouncing all these different sounds, and it was really innovative, and there's just, music's timeless,
Yeah.
you know.
Absolutely. Yeah. So in addition to the guitar, do you play anything else? Drums? Do you play keys?
Most of my percussion stuff's programmed. I do a lot of synthesizer stuff. If I know I network with musicians from all over the world. So like if I needed somebody to play a part, I'll just send them a file. Um, I wish I would have taken piano lessons. I remember growing up, my sister, I drove my younger sister to her piano lessons, and she was like, Michael, you should take piano. I think
Hmm.
you'd do good at it. I'm like, nah, you can't pick up chicks playing piano. You got to have electric guitar.
That's right.
And now
That's
I'm thinking I really should have taken those piano lessons because that would have helped me a lot with
Mhm.
these film parts.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah. Where have you grown the most throughout your musical career, you think?
um, just a lot of times, I think with film, the director will ask for a certain style or whatever, and I'm like, I'm kind of familiar with it. I'm not letting them know this, but I'm, I have to really research and
Mhm.
kind of study that style and try to understand it. And if it's too far beyond what my capabilities of understanding, or if I could do it, but it wouldn't sound as authentic as somebody who naturally does that style, then I'll outsource it. But it's really made me, really study other artists and see how they play and understand other forms of music better.
Okay. How
So,
how different I guess do kind of like a compare and contrast for me, a composition that's for a film as opposed to just a song like that you would hear on the radio. Are they drastically different or are they very similar?
Uh, um, the difference with film is the music's not meant to be noticed.
Mm, okay.
So if you're a music artist and you're really wanting your music heard, you should probably make an album or do something else, because the film, there's so many people involved, so many talents involved with the film, um, that if the main thing is the visual, and if at any time you've got music that's too loud, and that happens a lot of times with big action films, uh, if the music distracts the visual, then something's not right there. So you have to, if you're a music artist wanting to do film, you have to be in the mindset you're only there to add to the emotion of the characters, the environment, or the audience. So, um, you know, a lot of times I see where, a lot of these composers have to be, well, I really want this huge epic sound. But a lot of times I find that that distracts from the visual. And there's a lot more things you can do with just a real soft emotional piano in the distance, that where it makes the audience focus on the character and how they're feeling. It's a different world.
Yeah.
Oh.
Yeah. Do you set, I know that you said you have a day job. So do you set time aside to create, or is creating kind of like your release after work? Like, how do you do that?
It's pretty much a release. Um, Actually, I think my best work probably comes when I don't have a project.
Hmm.
I just want to go into the studio with no ideas, and then just turn everything on, and then just start playing stuff, and then see what actually comes out of it. Um, it's more inspiring when you don't have pressures of deadlines, and you know, so.
Yeah. Do you find that once you start a piece, you have to finish it? You got to get it all out, or do you kind of stop and start?
I would like to be able to start a project and finish it, quickly. But on the other hand, it's like, well, I'm real inspired when I start a project, but then it's like, then a film comes along and I got to do that. So then I'm thinking, okay, well, I'll come back to it when I regain that inspiration.
Yeah.
I mean, there's some records I've been working on for almost a decade,
Mm.
I'm like, I really need to finish that. So,
Mhm. Yeah. Well, I clicked on your YouTube link, man, and your sound is very crisp and your bass is very deep. Like, what's the key to that? Just very surfacely, because I'm sure if you get into the technical stuff, I won't understand a lot of it. But just on the surface, how do you get like such a quality sound?
a lot of it is just, I I monitor a lot through headphones, so, I'm probably way too picky, more than I should be. But yeah, after a while, you just know your sound, and you kind of mix and master to what your audience is gonna be. For like a lot of those samples, I knew that it wasn't gonna be played on some huge system. Most of the stuff's gonna be played through headphones or computer monitors. So, you kind of, again, you gear your sound to your market, you know. So,
Yeah.
pretty much anymore, the gear, it's all digital. So, as long as you're not overloading, your gains and stuff, it's going to sound pretty decent, you
Yeah.
know.
Yeah. Well, is audio like visual in this sense. What I find is, you might go to YouTube and then you see people say, oh, well, you can edit this video in Premiere Pro and make it look like a movie. But what I really find is if you don't capture the image well, there's not a whole lot you can do in post-production. Right. Is music the same way? Like if you don't capture a good sound, there's not a whole lot you can do with it.
There's a lot of plugins where you can try to doctor it up, but they always tell you that, garbage in is garbage out. You can try doctoring it up, but you can still kind of tell, mm-hmm. Like if you're recording something, you can make a mistake and then fix it later in the mix or edit it. But sometimes it's just faster if you just redo it, again, the technology is there for filmmakers. You can edit together film, but you still have to have that eye for what you're looking at and stuff, which again, everybody improves the art that they do,
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Again, the other thing is like, it's not necessarily all about gear. I mean, you could be in a $10 million studio, but you still have to write a riff. You still have to come up with a lyric,
That's right. Mm-hmm.
And there's no gear that's going to really do that yet. So,
yeah. Well, what are you, I don't even know what the correct word, is it editing? But what do you use to record? I'm sure you're not using GarageBand. Like what are you using professionally to record and mix?
I go through Pro Tools. There's several digital interfaces that you can use, like Cubase and Nuendo and stuff. But I think I don't think there's really an industry standard for anything. It's just whatever you're comfortable using. I would say that's what you should stick with. If whatever's comfortable to create. A lot of people use GarageBand. I've played around with it a little bit, but I'm not used to it, so I'm not good at it. So, but I know a lot of people that make great albums with it. So it's just whatever you're used to.
Yeah.
There's no rules to any of this.
Yeah. Well, how do you think you've managed to stay in it for so long? Is it the love of it, or like what keeps you in it?
It would have to be the love of it, because it's not the money. There's no money.
That's right.
So you just, again, it's like, well, if I was stuck on some island, I'd still probably be making songs,
Yeah.
So.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, how do you go about making a regular song for yourself? Like with the hook and the lyrics and the chorus and all of that?
I kind of do it a weird way where, some people, and everybody writes differently. Everybody has their own process. There's no rules again. I kind of just sit down with the guitar. I've got a little digital recorder, and whenever I come up with something that sounds good, I'll record it, and then I'll move on to the next riff. I don't even try to remember it.
Yeah.
I've got like a little recorder in the car where whenever I come up with a song, or I'll record it on my phone, I'll never be able to remember it. For lyrics, I've got these little old jelly jars scattered all around my house, and they're all filled with little torn up pieces of paper with cool lines or, cool ideas for song titles. So then whenever it's time to write an album, I'll gather up my jelly jars and dump them out and form lyrics and songs, But anyway, getting back to the guitar, I'll write, I'll fill up a whole recorder full of riffs, and then what I'll do is I kind of deal them out like cards, all the
Hmm.
riffs, as if they were like I was dealing out cards, and then from that point, I arrange them into songs. It's really a bizarre way to, kind of a mechanical, bizarre way to create, but just one style that I do.
Yeah.
Film stuff's different. Film, it's I'll talk to the director, producer, and they'll give me just a little insight on the film or the story of the characters, and I've already got ideas for the score. So
Yeah. Have you changed sonically over the years, or are you pretty much still the same where you were like when you first picked up the guitar?
I still haven't ever learned how to play it. I've got dozens of albums out, but I always think, hey, maybe I ought to learn how to play this the right way. I don't,
Hmm.
but um, hopefully I try to improve, you know. But otherwise, I think an artist develops what it is that they do, and then they expand on that a little bit, and that's what they're known to do. For film, the majority of the films that I've done are like dark dramas, horror, sci-fi, um, but I've never really done comedy.
Hmm.
That I don't understand really. I love watching comedy films,
Yeah, yeah,
but there's so many ways to go with that,
that's right.
and that's such a timing thing. You know, Either the music works or it doesn't.
Yeah.
So that's a style I've kind of shied away from, but you know, I know other people that do music for comedy films and animation, and that's what they're good at.
Yeah.
And usually, if I have a director ask me about that, I'll kind of push that style onto other composers.
Yeah. How much different? Because you've mentioned taking lessons. How differently do you think you would be sonically, or how much improved, or would it improve you at all had you taken these lessons? And either in whether or not you learn the piano through lessons or the guitar.
Well, growing up, I was in like high school band. I played the trumpet, and I thought music should be more of a like a creative thing instead of oh, you got to take your lessons, or if you don't show up for this this program or these lessons, then you're gonna fail. And I could never find the correlation between the academic side of art. To me, it was like art rules. We have no rules here.
Yeah, absolutely.
And I've talked to other academic musicians, and I mean a lot of them, they're great writers and composers of that, but there's others that, oh no, I could never compose. So you just play notes? That's not any fun. I ended up just dropping out of high school band because we had a teacher. uh, we had a great music room, and they had a jazz band, so they had this big old electric, I think Fender amp, and they had this electric bass. And me and this other buddy, who we both played guitar together, we'd sneak into the band room during lunch hour, and we'd turn on that bass amp, and we'd start playing Black Sabbath riffs.
Hmm.
Well, one day that teacher came out snapping her fingers, telling us, "Hey, hey, hey, you can't, you can't play that." And I'm like, "Well, I don't think we're gonna break it. I mean, And all these years, it's probably been about 35 years later, 40 years later. And I thought, you know what? That was a missed opportunity to inspire young kids. You know, if I'd have been the teacher, I'd have been, yeah, come in. Let's crank that up. You know, let's jam. And instead, she was thinking the academic side of it. And it's like, no, if you don't know how to play it, you shouldn't be playing it.
That's right.
You know, and that always stuck with me. And on one side, I wish I was, you know, I wish I knew more theory. I wish I would have stuck with it. On the other hand, that feeling at the time, I really started hating music. You know, it's like I had to get away from it because, you know, the academic side really killed it for me. You know, it was better when there were no barriers, when there were no rules. Then I didn't know when I didn't know what I was doing. You know, so, you know, and a lot of other composers probably, you know, would say that's blasphemy and would disagree with me. But, you know, again, that's my path, you know.